The year is 1914. Europe is a powder keg, great empires clash, tensions run high, the air is thick with suspicion and fear, nationalism is on the rise, countries are forming alliances, they are building up their armies. A spark could ignite the continent. Gavrilo Princip was born in Bosnia. He was a frail and sickly child, but he had a fiery spirit. He was determined to fight for the freedom of his people. Bosnia was under the rule of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Princip and many other Serbs wanted to break free.
I joined a secret society called the Black Hand. Our goal was to unite all Serbs. We were willing to use violence. We saw Archduke Franz Ferdinand as a symbol of oppression. He was the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne. He was planning to visit Sarajevo in June 1914. The Black Hand saw this as an opportunity. We decided to assassinate him.
June 28, 1914, dawned bright and sunny in Sarajevo. Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie arrived by train. They were met with cheering crowds. They were unaware of the danger that lurked in the streets.
We were happy waving at the crowds from our open car.
The Black Hand had positioned assassins along the Archduke's route. They were armed with pistols and bombs. The first attempt on the Archduke's life failed. A bomb exploded near his car. It injured several people, but the Archduke and his wife were unharmed. The Archduke insisted on visiting the injured in the hospital. His driver took a wrong turn. The car stalled near a cafe.
I was sitting at the cafe. I saw my chance. I pulled out my pistol and fired 2 shots.
The first shot hit Archduke Franz Ferdinand in the neck. The second shot hit Sophie in the abdomen. Both were mortally wounded. They died within minutes.
It was so sudden, we didn't stand a chance.
Princip was immediately arrested. He was too young to be executed. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison. He died in prison in 1918. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand sent shockwaves through Europe. Austria-Hungary was outraged.
They blamed Serbia for the assassination. They issued an ultimatum to Serbia.
The ultimatum contained a number of harsh demands. Serbia agreed to most of the demands. However, they rejected one key demand. This was enough for Austria-Hungary.
On July 28, 1914, Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. The system of alliances that had been building for decades kicked in.
Russia mobilized its troops in support of Serbia.
Germany, allied with Austria-Hungary, declared war on Russia.
France, allied with Russia, declared war on Germany. Great Britain, allied with France and Russia, declared war on Germany. In just a few short weeks, Europe was at war. Section 6. Europe at war. The continent was plunged into chaos and conflict, marking the beginning of one of the deadliest wars in human history. World War I was unlike any war that had come before it. It was a conflict that involved not just armies but entire societies. Civilians and soldiers alike were caught in the crossfire. It was a total war. Entire nations were mobilized. Men were conscripted into the military, while women and children worked in factories to support the war effort. The economies of the warring nations were entirely focused on producing weapons and supplies. New technologies such as machine guns, tanks, and airplanes made the war more deadly than ever before. These innovations changed the nature of warfare, making it more mechanized and impersonal. The machine gun in particular could mow down waves of soldiers in seconds. The Western Front became bogged down in trench warfare. Soldiers lived in muddy, rat-infested trenches for months on end, enduring constant shelling and the ever-present threat of a gas attack. The land between the trenches, known as no man's land, was a deadly expanse of barbed wire and craters. Millions of soldiers were killed in brutal battles. The Battle of the Somme and the Battle of Verdun are just 2 examples of the horrific carnage that took place. These battles resulted in hundreds of thousands of casualties, with little ground gained by either side. The Eastern Front was more fluid. Unlike the stalemate in the West, the Eastern Front saw large-scale movements of troops and sweeping offensives. However, the fighting was no less intense or deadly. However, it was no less brutal. The harsh winters and vast distances added to the suffering of the soldiers. Battles such as Tannenberg and the Brusilov offensive resulted in massive casualties. The Ottoman Empire joined the war on the side of the Central Powers. This decision opened up new fronts in the Middle East, where the British and Ottoman forces clashed in fierce battles. This led to fighting in the Middle East. The Gallipoli Campaign and the Arab Revolt are notable examples of the conflict in this region. The harsh desert conditions and the strategic importance of the Suez Canal made this theater of war particularly challenging. Japan, allied with Great Britain, seized German colonies in Asia. This expansion was part of Japan's broader strategy to increase its influence in the region. The United States tried to remain neutral. President Woodrow Wilson initially kept the country out of the conflict, advocating for peace and diplomacy. However, they were drawn into the conflict in 1917. The tipping point came with the resumption of unrestricted submarine warfare by Germany, which threatened American lives and commerce. This was after German submarines sank American ships. The sinking of the Lusitania and other vessels galvanized public opinion in the United States, leading to a declaration of war against Germany. Section 7. A World Engulfed. In this chapter, we delve into the cataclysmic events of World War I, a conflict that reshaped the world in ways that are still felt today. World War I, often referred to as the Great War, was a global conflict that erupted in 1914 and lasted until 1918. It was a war unlike any other, involving nations from every corner of the globe. Over 30 countries were drawn into the fray, forming two major alliances, the Allies and the Central Powers. The scale of the conflict was unprecedented, with battles raging across Europe, Africa, the Middle East, and even parts of Asia. The human cost was staggering. More than 15 million people lost their lives, including soldiers and civilians. The war left deep scars on the landscape and on the hearts of those who survived. The impact of World War I extended far beyond the battlefield. It profoundly influenced the course of the 20th century, leading to significant social, political, and economic changes. The war led to the collapse of several empires, including the Austro-Hungarian, Ottoman, Russian, and German empires. These collapses created power vacuums and set the stage for future conflicts. The map of Europe was redrawn, with new countries emerging and old ones disappearing. The Treaty of Versailles and other peace agreements attempted to create a new order, but they also sowed the seeds of future discord. The end of World War I did not bring lasting peace. Instead, it ushered in a new era of global conflict, setting the stage for World War II just 2 decades later. The war officially ended on November 11, 1918, when Germany signed an armistice with the Allies. This moment was met with widespread relief and celebration, but the underlying tensions remained unresolved. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, was intended to bring a definitive end to the conflict. However, its terms were harsh and punitive, particularly towards Germany. The treaty imposed severe restrictions on Germany's military capabilities and demanded substantial reparations. These measures were meant to prevent future aggression but instead fostered resentment and economic hardship. The treaty's clauses placed full blame for the war on Germany, a stipulation that many Germans found humiliating and unjust. This sense of injustice would have far-reaching consequences. The narrative of blame and the heavy reparations demanded from Germany created a fertile ground for nationalist and extremist ideologies to take root. The economic impact of the reparations was devastating. Germany's economy struggled under the weight of the payments, leading to hyperinflation and widespread poverty. This economic turmoil, combined with national humiliation, fueled widespread resentment among the German population. Protests and political unrest became common as people sought someone to blame for their suffering. This environment of anger and discontent provided a fertile ground for the rise of Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party. Hitler's promises to restore Germany's former glory and to overturn the Treaty of Versailles resonated with many, ultimately leading to the outbreak of World War II. Section 8. The Legacy of the Great War. The Great War, as it was known then, or World War I as we call it today, was a cataclysmic event that reshaped the world in ways that are still evident a century later. World War I was a watershed event in human history. It was a conflict of unprecedented scale and devastation, involving nations from across the globe and resulting in millions of casualties. It marked the end of an era. The pre-war world, characterized by empires and monarchies, was irrevocably changed. The war brought about the collapse of several empires, including the Austro-Hungarian, Ottoman, Russian, and German empires. It ushered in a new era of global conflict and uncertainty. The Treaty of Versailles, which officially ended the war, imposed harsh penalties on Germany and sowed the seeds for future conflicts, including World War II. The war had a profound impact on art, literature, and culture. The disillusionment and trauma experienced by soldiers and civilians alike were reflected in the works of writers and artists of the time, leading to movements such as Dadaism and Surrealism. It led to the rise of new ideologies such as communism. The Russian Revolution of 1917, which was partly a result of the war's pressures, led to the establishment of the Soviet Union and the spread of communist ideology. It also led to the rise of fascism. The economic and social turmoil following the war created fertile ground for extremist ideologies, with leaders like Mussolini in Italy and later Hitler in Germany capitalizing on the chaos. It also led to the development of new technologies such as the radio. The need for effective communication during the war accelerated advancements in radio technology, which would go on to revolutionize mass communication. It also led to the development of new technologies such as the airplane. Aerial combat and reconnaissance became crucial during the war, spurring rapid advancements in aviation technology. These technologies would transform the world in the decades to come. The innovations in communication and transportation that emerged from the war laid the groundwork for the modern world. The legacy of World War I is still felt today. The war's impact on geopolitics, society, and technology continues to shape our world, reminding us of the far-reaching consequences of global conflict. It serves as a reminder of the human cost of war. The countless lives lost and the widespread destruction underscore the devastating impact of armed conflict. It also serves as a warning about the dangers of nationalism, militarism, and unchecked ambition. The war's origins in nationalist fervor and militaristic policies highlight the perils of such ideologies, urging us to strive for peace and cooperation in our global community. Section 9. 1. Man's impact. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand by Gavrilo Princip was a pivotal moment in history. It was the spark that ignited the powder keg of Europe. It set in motion a chain of events that led to the deadliest conflict the world had ever seen. Princip's actions show how the actions of one individual can have far-reaching consequences. They also serve as a reminder of the complex and interconnected nature of history. World War I was a complex event with many causes. However, there is no doubt that the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand was the catalyst that plunged the world into war.